around the world, across the nation, and up your street. It is the 2-Point Deduction podcast right here on MMAmania.com. I am your host, as per usual, Matt Ryan. And folks, it is a big week in mixed martial arts, not because of UFC Rio Rancho this coming weekend. It is because the UFC, once again, has had an event completely clusterfucked by judges. And as per usual, I am your host, Matt Ryan. Just said that. Our cameraman, Clement, the reason why we are the audio-visual kick to the genitalia every single week right here on your favorite audio or visual streaming platform. He is not with us this week because he decided to go practice for the Olympics by climbing K2. Now, he didn't know where K2 was, and he didn't know K2 training had nothing to do with the Olympics, but decided to take his camera and tell me to, and I quote, "Hi diddly fuck yourself, fat man." So we hope to have Clement back next week if he does not get hypothermia because he left wearing board shorts and a Jimmy Buffett t-shirt. He is an odd man. He's a very odd man. But we've got a big show. We'll be playing science versus probability and a whole lot more this week. But let's go back to UFC 246 for a second. Let's go back to UFC 247 for a second. Jon Jones and Dominic Reyes were the main event of the pay-per-view from inside the Toyota Arena in Houston, Texas. And if you watched myself and Harry Turjanian this past weekend on SBN MMA for our live coverage of that card, both Harry and I believe Dominic Reyes was going to do something only Matt Hamill has done officially, and that is beat Jon Jones. We saw Jon Jones become more human, and I said it last week on MMAmania.com and right here on this podcast. We thought the gold veneer one day would wear down on Jon Jones, and seemingly throughout the first 3 rounds of Jon Jones and Dominic Reyes' fight for the UFC light heavyweight title, it seemed that it had. It seemed that Dominic Reyes was going to be the new UFC light heavyweight champion as he continued to outstrike and outwork Jon Jones. In the 4th round, you saw a little bit more of Jon Jones, the world champion, the man we've seen, the world beater, try to put the pressure on Dominic Reyes and put Reyes on his bicycle. And in the 5th round, you can undeniably say Jon Jones won the 5th round. But when you look at rounds 1, 2, and 3, with one judge giving Jon Jones round 2, you cannot, I repeat, cannot believe that Jon Jones held on to that victory so tightly and remained UFC light heavyweight champion. I'm taking a look at the scorecards, which you can see on the MMA Mania Twitter account. You go on down into the media section. You check back this past Saturday night / Sunday morning, wherever you were in the world, and we have to go through this and understand the fact that the final score for Jones and for Reyes, one judge had round 1 for Reyes, round 2 for Jones, and 2 judges saw round 2 for Jon Jones. Only one, Chris Lee, saw round 2 for Dominic Reyes. And the consensus was, at least for me and Harry Turjanian, that the first 3 rounds all belonged to Dominic Reyes. But according to the officials, according to Chris Lee, Joe Solis, they gave round 3, 4, and 5 to the current reigning and defending UFC 205-pound champion, while official Marco Rosales gave round 2 to Jones, and then rounds 4 and 5, only giving rounds 1 and 3 to Dominic Reyes. For a 48-47 verdict, Joe Solis a 49-46 verdict, only giving Reyes 1 round. Joe Solis believes that not only did Jon Jones dominate the final 2 rounds, but in a round that many people saw Dominic Reyes winning, round 2 and round 3, he gave him the Jones. And if you followed MMA Mania on Twitter, and if you followed us all night long on the SBN MMA YouTube channel, there were a lot of things going on with the judging. Andrea Lee's fight being one of them. One of the first fights on the early prelims, pulling a full Iowa caucus and having the computer system that tallied the judges' scores crash in between the end of round 3 And then when the well-dressed, well-adorned Bruce Buffer was set to give the final scores and announce who the winner of the fight was, the Texas judging system, the judges in Texas, the way that this Texas delegation has been put together is complete and utter bullshit. You can agree or disagree with me on Dominic Reyes, but on a UFC card that was already light, that had Juan Adams in a featured fight who just got released a few days ago, when you look at a card where Valentina Shevchenko and Caitlin Chookagian was the co-main event and deserved to be the co-main event, but it was a pistol whipping by the Bullet Valentina Shevchenko on a UFC card that Dana White would be praying to the MMA gods for a unexpectedly amazing fight night. And there were some great fights on that card. But holy shit is the bureaucracy in mixed martial arts continuing to screw up opportunities for new stars to be made, new moments to be made, for fans to trust the judges. Because right now, MMA is going through a crisis of confidence when it comes to judges in certain situations that boxing continuously has gone through. When you go back to Canelo Alvarez and Gennady Golovkin, now going on 3 years ago, when they fought for the first time, and Adelaide Byrd, her scorecard, which was one of the most egregious scorecards in boxing history in Las Vegas. And this is someone who remembers Lennox Lewis and Evander Holyfield's first fight inside Madison Square Garden, when I was listening to WFAN and Tony Page saying this fight was a complete screw job, that people were paid off. And MMA is trying to stem that tide, is trying to prove that they are doing everything they can to make this a legitimate sport. After a sport that comes from the world of pro wrestling, MMA's roots are deep within the world of professional wrestling, which already gives some people concern. When you look at the accusations based around Pride and other organizations in Japan for worked results because of UWFI and its connection to professional wrestling, and a lot of the great MMA stars coming out of Japan working with a New Japan Pro Wrestling. When you look at a Suzuki, who is not only a Pancrase legend, but also a New Japan legend. Yeah, a Minoru Suzuki. You're looking at something that is completely screwing up the future of mixed martial arts in the state of Texas, a great fight state, where you see world championship title fights happening in boxing, a state that has a connection to the UFC. The Fertitta brothers' cousin owns the Houston Rockets, who play inside that arena, inside the Toyota Center. Derek Lewis, who lives in Houston, someone who got a win in his hometown. How do you consider that a win for the UFC this past weekend? Even though John Jones retained the title, business as usual, but there are more questions than there are answers for fans of mixed martial arts, for fans of the UFC, and for fans of John Jones. What's next for him? Because it seems like he's either bored or just biding his time until he goes up to heavyweight. Is it an Anthony Smith rematch? We talked about this last week. We talked about the idea of what is next for John Jones at 205 pounds. And it's all rematches. It's maybe seeing Israel Adesanya move up to light heavyweight, but that's not even going to happen for another year. And we may see John Jones fight 2 more times this year. 2 more times against opponents he's not going to want to fight, and it's going to show. And John Jones almost got caught on Saturday night, and honestly, as an MMA personality, as a sports yeller, as someone who makes money off the sport of mixed martial arts, I don't know if I want to see John Jones not a champion, because then there's less people interested. John Jones is a crossover star, for good or for bad. He is one of the biggest names in mixed martial arts. He is one of the defining athletes of the last decade in this sport. He is one of the people who helped legitimize this sport. A college athlete, college wrestler, top-notch wrestler, who comes from a family that features NFL players in his immediate family. His brothers play for the National Football League, grew up in Syracuse, and is one of the first big names to rise out of the modern era, past the Liddell and Couture era, past the heavyweight era, where giving birth to the Conor McGregors, to the Ronda Rouseys, to the Valentina Shevchenko and Amanda Nunes's. This current generation of mixed martial artists was spearheaded by people like Jon Jones, people like Daniel Cormier. And he's only a few years older than me, and I'm 30, and Jon Jones still has a lot of time left. He's still in immense physical condition. The only real time he's taken off is due to his suspensions, due to his issues with drug abuse, alcohol abuse, Pico and the Grams, who are our house band. But you keep going back to this idea of, does Jon Jones give a shit? Does he really give a shit? Does he really care about fighting at 205? Or is he just biding his time until Stipe and DC figure it out? Because Jon Jones is only as good as his rivals. When he's got some reason to show up to work, he will fight down to his opponent instead of making them fight up to him. And we saw it on Saturday night. We saw for 5 rounds, for half a second, the world held its breath and expected Dominic Reyes to be named the new UFC light heavyweight champion of the world. And I was one of them. Harry Turjanian was one of them. Most of the people that were watching with us, thank you, every single person who took their time to watch along with us. And we will be back for UFC 248. And I cannot wait to see Yoel Romero and Israel Adesanya. But holy shit, for a minute, we were going to have a world where Jon Jones wasn't light heavyweight champion, and we've been there the past 2 to 3 years. But it wouldn't have been lost in a boardroom. It wouldn't have been lost in a USADA lab. It would have been lost inside the octagon. And for the first time ever, Jon Jones would have fairly lost a fight. And I don't know what that means for Dana White. I don't know what that means for the light heavyweight division, but he's got to be praying every single day that some of the backlog in middleweight forces themselves to go up and get out of 185 and go into 205. He's hoping every single day there is someone out there that will move up to 205 pounds to give Jon Jones the challenge he wants. Because are we going to run it back with Dominic Reyes? Is that what Jon Jones is going to want to do? Is that going to be the main event at International Fight Week? Or is that going to be the co-main event to a Conor McGregor fight? No. Jon Jones will be the main event of his own pay-per-view, probably in maybe June or August. And we're going to be asking ourselves the same questions now in February that we are in June, in August, and then probably again in December. When is Jon Jones finally going to move up to heavyweight? And will we see the same Jon Jones, the world beater, that dominated just about a year ago when he returned to regain that light heavyweight title? The guy that knocked out Daniel Cormier, the guy that beat Daniel Cormier twice. Not many a man who could say they did that. And I don't know if that Jones is going to be showing up until he gains a pound over 205. Let's go to the news. We've all made that one comment on the internet that pissed people off. And for most of us, it's political. For a user named Tim Mutz on the Instagram machine, it was calling out Donald Cowboy Cerrone because the UFC 246 headliner, he may have gotten beaten by Conor McGregor and his shoulders. He might have got Millie rocked at UFC 246. But the man with the most wins in UFC history, one of the most bonus nights in UFC history, decided to go after one of the people trolling him. Tim Mutz, we'll call him Timmy Mutz, commented, maybe it's a good idea to start a new career, which was misspelled, so good job, Tim Mutz, like driving snow scooters, because clearly fighting is not for you. Now, Donald Cerrone is many things, but more importantly, he is a fighter. He is someone who has walked into the cage more times than any fighter in UFC history and won more times than any fighter in UFC history. So I feel like Tim Mutz may spoke a little out of pocket there. Now, that's essentially going up to someone with a Harvard law degree who taught constitutional law and said, you don't know America. You don't know the laws of the land. So, bad call. Pretty much all around agree that's a bad call. My dog is agreeing, and she's asleep. So, Donald Cerrone, instead of letting this one go, walking away, taking a shot, drinking a Budweiser, punching the heavy bag, he decided to say, tell you what, I live at address redacted, New Mexico, 87015. Come on down to the ranch and try your luck with someone that sucks at fighting. I'll leave the gate open for you. But you a scared little bitch that talks shit on IG, so show up and let's just see what kind of man you are. Now, Donald Cerrone has gone full-blown angry man in a Facebook forum, on a Facebook fan page, and called out a dude to show up to his house. And Donald Cerrone did this, the one thing that Khabib Nurmagomedov wanted Conor McGregor to do. He sent his location. Donald Cerrone sent location, dropped the pin, and said, show up. Now, we're going to assume that Tim Mutz decided to not head on down to the BMF Ranch. He may be having a GoFundMe right now, maybe trying to raise a little bit of funds to go from wherever he is in the world. Let's just assume it's Spokane, Washington. To go from Spokane, Washington, all the way down to New Mexico to the BMF Ranch and test Donald Cerrone. Now, we know that's not going to happen. I know it, you know it, the dog knows it, that good old Timmy is not going to be making his way downtown walking slow, and he's going to stay home now. He's not going to make his way to the BMF Ranch. But what if he did? Now, imagine, if you will, a brand new film called Tim with His Mitts. And you have Donald Cerrone throw out this challenge, and Tim Mutz suggested. Now, we could be a documentary. It could be a Kevin James-esque comedy. It could be a sequel to that Kevin James film that featured Bas Rutten and a variety of other MMA fighters. And Kevin James is an ex-amateur wrestler and someone who trains with Bas Rutten, so I'm not fucking with Kevin James. Not my business. Thank you for giving Patton Oswalt a career and money. I'll always be grateful for that. But what if that was the sequel to Here Comes the Boom? No Selma Hayek, but we do have a man who talks shit on the internet to fight an actual UFC fighter. The revitalization of Bully Beatdown. We have Instagram trolls going up against UFC fighters. Hell, we can have them go up against Bellator fighters, PFL fighters. They're doing a reality competition anyway to see who's going to join the league this year. Let's see if any of those Instagram tough guys, the ones that comment on our page, on the MMA Mania page, on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and say that these fighters suck, they don't know how to fight, they could do better than them inside the octagon. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens when these guys have to cut weight, go through the whole fight camp process. We'll give them 6 weeks. Give them a 6-week camp at a gym, teach them how to fight, and see if they can beat a Donald Cerrone. See if they can beat someone within our community, someone like a Diego Sanchez who main events UFC Rio Rancho this weekend. Let's see if that happens. Because if these guys want to talk out of pocket, I'm not doing that. I'll give my opinion. I'll yell at judges all day long. I'll say I thought somebody else won a fight. But I'm not going to say that that person doesn't deserve to fight or doesn't know how to fight. They get paid to do that. I get paid to talk. This is the delineation point. And Tim Mutz, I don't know what he does for a living, but it's that old joke. I don't come to your job to tell you how to do whatever. And I feel like people forget that and then get caught up in themselves. They feel like that comment will just be one in a sea of comments, one in a deluge of pomp and circumstance and respect and love for these competitors, and they're not going to get their punk card pulled. And, well, Donald Cerrone decided to pull a punk card this week. So, Tim Mutz, I'll make you an offer right now. If you decide to fight Donald Cerrone, I will help you find a trainer, a camp, and give you 6 weeks to make middleweight or welterweight. Let's do welterweight, 175 pounds. And not even 170 pounds. I'm sorry, I'm very tired, and I've just been talking for over 7 minutes. And if you do that, and you fight Donald Cerrone, and you win, we'll give you a trophy. We've got trophies in the office. We've got bobbleheads. We've got a whole bunch of stuff here. We'll give you that. And that is our main headline this week. And you can read the full story at MMAmania.com. Let's take a look at another item in the news. Ronda Rousey. She will never go away. The current WWE superstar has decided to go back into the world of competition, but not inside the WWE ring, not inside the octagon, not inside the world of judo, not stepping back onto the tatami, but competitive gaming. Yes, that is right. Ronda Rousey has joined the cacophony, there we go, cacophony of performers who are now streaming their video game playing. This coming from the TMZ. Ronda Rousey has signed an exclusive deal to play video games on the internet for Facebook. Rousey made the announcement on Thursday, claiming gaming has always been a huge part of my life, and I cannot wait to share that passion with my millions of fans on Facebook gaming. Through my streams, people can hang out with the real me and not the character version of myself they're used to seeing, though the rowdy one can't always be contained. All right, so whoever came up with that copy for Ronda Rousey should be thrown through a barbershop window. It's good for Ronda making her money as she takes time off from the WWE. She has not been seen in a WWE ring in almost a year since WrestleMania at MetLife Stadium in the main event. And one would tend to think that she will be appearing back in the WWE after WrestleMania, unless she does decide to have a baby with her husband, Travis Brown, which I believe is what they are focused on at the moment. But Ronda Rousey joins people like Ninja and Zero and Question Mark. One of those is not real, and I really don't know anymore, to become a video game streamer on Facebook. Now, we here at the 2 Point Deduction love our video games, and we have a list of video games that we would like her to play. First is Mystical Ninja. And how about just Tetris? Just nothing but Tetris. She says she's a big fan of Pokemon Blue. Let's see if she plays all the Pokemons in a row. It is a big part right now in mixed martial arts, that e-gaming, that streaming atmosphere. You look at Mighty Mouse Johnson, you see a litany of fighters joining Twitch. Demetrius Johnson was signed with Xbox as a sponsor of his. Gaming and MMA are very, very close-knit. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens as the world gets a little bit bigger and as esports continues to become a bigger part of the world. It's selling out Madison Square Garden. It's selling out the Barclays Center. Thousands of people are watching at a time. Millions of people are watching streamers on Twitch, on Facebook Gaming, on Windows' platform. There's a world out there that may make these athletes more money than fighting. And I think we may see a day where people are going to be known more for being esports athletes than they are for mixed martial arts athletes. I think that's significantly down the road. But as this continues to grow, a Street Fighter tournament was on TNT. We may see fighting game competitors become the new fighting stars, the new fighting champions of the world. Someone who can play as Ryu may be more adept and may be more popular than a John Jones one day or a Conor McGregor, because they could have the same personality, the same swagger, without any of the injuries, without any of the USADA things. And there are performance-enhancing drugs and drug tests in esports. I found that out in my research and in my life among Twitchers and streamers and the who's-yas and the what's-yas. But is this the better road? Is this the road for the next generation of combat sports athletes? Now, I love a good prize fight as much as anyone. I love a blood sport. Give me Kumite 85 days a week, 397,000 days a year. But at a certain point, you look at the human cost of it. You look at a BJ Penn. You look at Chuck Liddell. Chuck Liddell is 48 years old. In 2018, fought Tito Ortiz for the third time, not fighting in just about a decade. And you saw him on his walk to the cage that night, and you saw this man that at one point was a world conqueror, the baddest human being on planet Earth. And he's just someone with a limp, a significant limp, who hobbled into the cage and got cooked in under 3 minutes. At some point, do we say that's enough? Do we try to find a better way? Do we try to find a different way? Because we have these arguments with football all the time. How to make the game safer, how to prevent CTE. And esports may be an answer. And I know the old guard, the people that listen to WFAN, the people of my generation or older than me will say, fuck that shit, that's not real. Fuck, Game of Thrones isn't real, and people treat it like it's happening in real time. You watch your favorite TV shows, you relate to these characters, you relate to these personalities, but they're not real. And it's still a skill. It's still these people training and learning and developing a skill set that is some of the highest level athleticism in the world. The same ability it would take to hit a fastball, to see the subtleties in a game, to learn the intricacies of a game and know exactly when to do the right combination at the right time to defeat your opponent. That's some of the best hand-eye coordination in the world. And you drill at it, and you work at it, and you train at it. There's training facilities now. This thing is beyond our expectations, beyond any reasonable idea of what we can do right now with our own bodies. Will it happen? Eventually. Eventually, we're going to see these things happen. We're going to see the evolution of combat sports into esports or something different. Might be that shitty Hugh Jackman movie with the robots. It might be BattleBots that work this time. Will humans fighting one another ever go away? Good Lord, no. It's been around since the first person walked out of the ocean. Since the first protozoa split off. It's in our genetics. It's in our DNA. It's a part of who we are as people. But you gotta wonder at some point if there's a better way. Right now, we're going to go to Science and Probability with myself and Stephanie Sotilli. Hey, Steph, it's time for Science and Probability. How are you doing?
Hey, yes, it is. Are we going to also go over...
yeah, we're going to go over UFC 247.
Won?
Yeah, so last week we had 3 fights. This week we will have 3 fights. We'll have UFC Rio Rancho for you in a moment. But
what is that? Say that again.
Rio Rancho.
Okay, it sounds like Rancho Relaxo from The Simpsons. Is that
it,
what it is?
It's not. It's not Rancho.
It's not a fight sponsored by a spa?
No. No mani-pedis.
We're not going to go to Rio Relaxo?
No.
Get some bourbon with an ice cream sundae?
Ooh, that does sound really good.
And watch, what was Marge watching? I want to say Thelma and Louise, but I don't think that's true.
It was a version of...
yeah.
It was a version of Thelma and Louise.
She was naked in a bathtub and had her hair down.
That sounds...
She was eating an ice cream sundae.
Sounds like a great evening.
Sounds like a fanfiction.net story in the beginning, because it's always going to be Marge Simpson naked.
Ugh, I don't need that in my life.
Or Edna Krabappel. I mean, you know what Rule 34 is, right?
Yeah, I know what Rule 34 is, but I don't need...
Anything that can be in a sexual position will be.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
It's also like Godwin's theory. At some point, somebody's going to mention Hitler, And they shouldn't, but they
Sure.
do.
You know what cartoon I would not mind cuddling with and eating an ice cream sandwich with?
Who?
I realized this as I started watching it. When I was 9 years old and Duckman premiered, I had a crush on Duckman. Which really, in essence, meant I had a crush on Jason freaking Alexander.
Yeah, it speaks more about you than anything else.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
let's talk about UFC 247, Steph.
I don't have a crush on any of them, so this will be totally unbiased, scientific guesses.
Well, we're going to go through the results of last week first.
Okay, cool. Just saying.
So in the main event, it was John Jones versus Dominic Reyes, the
Okay.
Devastator versus Bones, and John Jones won that. And
I went with Bones.
we both picked Bones.
Yeah, science wins.
So we both have one each. We also had Valentina Bullet Shevchenko against Caitlin the Blonde Fighter Chukagian.
Yes, I remember this. Yes.
I picked the Bullet.
Okay, and I picked the blonde.
Yes, and the Bullet won.
Exactly. And do you know why? I was watching this fight.
Yes.
She was not blonde.
She was
That
somewhat
was my
blonde.
whole theory. She was not blonde. That was very dark hair. My whole theory is that she was called the blonde fighter, and I said there's multiple blonde fighters. You could do an evil twin thing and confuse the bullet because there's only one bullet. And look, I mean, she just keep your roots dyed. Like, that's all. Just keep them blonde, and then you just confused your opponent.
And the third fight was Derek the Black Beast Lewis against Alir Sledgehammer Latifi.
Right.
And the Black Beast would walk away with the decision victory.
Who did I say would
You picked the Sledgehammer.
Okay.
So right now I have a 2-1 victory over you.
Okay, so right now probability is winning. That's fine. That's, one chapter does not tell the whole story.
It does not. It does not.
So how many bouts are we going to have? How many weeks is this going to go?
This one is going to go. We're going to go until the end of the year. At the end of the year, there will be cake.
Good Lord. So wait, 40 more of these?
Give
Roughly?
or take. Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay, we're going to have a lot of data.
Yeah.
Science versus probability. You know what, though, to be fair, when I would do this for another sport. Can we name other sports? Are they going to get
Yeah,
mad?
I
All
think
right,
they're
for
gonna get
football.
I talked about esports for like 20 minutes
That's
on the
not
show.
a sport, though.
No, it's going to be.
Just because the word's in it doesn't mean it's a sport.
Well, you listen to my reasoning.
Well, hold on. I had a point.
Okay,
You
go for
interrupted
it.
me. I said, well, I did this before with football, and that was 52 weeks. So I guess
It was 22
22.
weeks.
Wow. So yeah, this is way worse. This is the football was half the time this was.
Well, we're going to be making our way down to New Mexico, Rio Rancho, New Mexico, in the Santa Ana Star Center tomorrow night for UFC Anderson versus Blachowicz 2.
You don't want to discuss why esports is not a sport?
Well, I went into that already on the podcast. I went into why I think it's a sport. Why do you think it's not a sport?
What do I think? Because it's not a sport. It's
Why?
it's a game.
That's not an answer.
They're playing games.
So is everybody. So is
It's
baseball.
a game.
Baseball's a
No,
game.
there's a reason why chess is
Football's a
not a sport.
game.
It's a game.
But some people consider baseball a game.
Or checkers.
Is NASCAR a sport?
That's a race. See, there's categories.
Yeah, but it's
It's a
two people
sport, a game,
competing
and a
against each
race.
other.
Yeah, but it's a race.
It's a competition.
Okay, sure, but is it a sport? Are all races sports, or are all sports races?
Well, we'll figure
It's
that
like
out at some
that math question.
All right, well, let's take a look at the main event. It is Corey Anderson versus Jan Blachowicz, and I probably pronounced that name terribly wrong.
It sounds like a fake name.
No, it's a real name.
How's
So
it
it's
spelled?
BLAC.
Just show it to me, man.
Oh. The patience of a dead
Just
man.
show it to me. I had patience. You were gonna spell it, and I said, "Show it to me." Blachowicz, maybe.
Yes.
Maybe not. Maybe the ch is not a k sound. It's
no.
a ch sound.
Well, it's Jan, Prince of Cieszyn
Prince of what?
Blachowicz. Cieszyn. It's his hometown in Poland.
He's the prince.
Yes.
All right, it's a prince versus
Corey Overtime Anderson. These two have
Overtime.
faced off against each other before, with Anderson getting the victory back at UFC 191 by unanimous decision. He would follow that up with wins over Fabio Maldonado and Filthy Tom Lawler before losing to Mauricio Shogun Hua. Right now, walking into this fight, Anderson is rocking a 4-fight win streak, 3 by way of unanimous decision, and his most recent win, a TKO victory over Johnny Walker back in December at UFC 244. On the opposite side for Blachowicz,
I'm not listening to any of this.
you are certainly not. Blachowicz is walking in with a 2-fight winning streak over Ronaldo Jacare Souza back at UFC Sao Paulo in November. and a knockout victory of former world champion Luke Rockhold at UFC 239 back in July of last year. So
when are the consecutive sack races?
that would be if this fight goes to a draw as per the New Mexico State Athletic Commission.
Okay, cool. In Rio Relaxo.
Yes.
Got it.
So, Steph, it's overtime versus the Prince. Who you got?
Oh, my goodness. That's so. Can I ask why he's named Overtime?
Because he plays like it's overtime. Play hard to go home.
Oh, you mean another sport?
Yeah.
Like baseball goes into overtime?
Baseball goes into extra innings.
Extra innings. Hockey goes into...
Hockey, basketball, and football go into extra innings.
Hockey goes into extra innings?
I mean, overtime.
There we go. Anyways.
I'm very tired.
Probability fails. You know what? I'm going to say I'm going to go with Prince.
All right.
Because Prince, is, just like a monarchy, I feel like they will outlast a normal stretch of just overtime.
Well, I feel Blachowicz, he's basically gotten two more quality opponents. He lost his last loss was to Thiago Santos, who's a former 205-pound championship contender. But
I mean, you spit in probability at me. It's not my game.
I know. I'm giving
or
you
my sport or my race.
Well, I'm giving you my prediction. I believe that Jan Blachowicz will get the win on Saturday night in Rio Rancho.
See, it's
You're
Rancho
fucking me up.
Relaxo.
You're fucking me up. Next up, it is Diego the Nightmare Sanchez
Ooh.
going up against Michel the Demolisher Pereira.
Oh. Am I giving my pick now, or
Yeah,
you have
you
more
give your
stats
pick.
to throw out?
I'll go through the stats in my section.
Okay. I mean, it's the Nightmare versus the what is it? The Devastator.
The Demolisher.
Demolisher. See, Nightmare makes me think of Freddy Krueger.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that is a much scarier image. And also, nightmares, you can't stop that. You have to sleep. Everybody has to sleep. Even the Demolisher has to sleep at some point. And what are you going to find when you're asleep? I ask you.
I don't know.
Nightmares.
Oh.
So I feel like the nightmare is going to linger.
This is going to be Pereira's third fight in the UFC, debuting back at UFC on ESPN Plus 10 last year with a TKO victory over Danny Roberts. Lost in his last fight against Tristan Conley by unanimous decision at UFC on ESPN Plus 16 back in September. This is the toughest opponent to date for Pereira against Diego Sanchez, one of the more well-known competitors in UFC history, one of the most well-known competitors in MMA history, former contender for the UFC Lightweight Championship, and one of the Ultimate Fighter Season 1 winners, back defeating Kenny Florian at the finale all the way back in 2005. That's how long he's been a member of the UFC roster. The 38-year-old, though, has lost 3 of his last 5, most recently to Michael Chiesa at UFC 239, but got wins over Mickey Gall and Craig White at 235 and 228, respectively. But against more serious components, like serious opponents, not components, what's wrong with me? Against Matt Brown and Ally Aquinta, he took back-to-back knockout losses. And if you take a look at Pereira's record, his first 2 wins in the his first win in the UFC, his only win in the UFC, and his last 2 victories before entering the UFC came by way of knockout or TKO. Sanchez is 38. It's going to be really hard to take a look and view him against a younger fighter like Pereira with that chin in question. I'm going to be taking Michel Pereira.
That was a Demolisher?
Yes.
Yes, okay. There you go.
And
That's how I know these people.
And our final fight this week, best names.
Best names?
Best names.
What's
it is
best name?
Montana De La Rosa.
Oh, it's so fun.
Taking
De La
on
Rosa.
Mara Romero Borella.
That's a mouthful. What is it?
Mara Romero Borella.
One more time.
Mara Romero
Romero
Borella.
That is absolutely an actor vocal warm up.
And her nickname is Kunoichi.
Kunoichi. What language is that?
Hold on, sorry. Kunoichi.
Can I see it?
It is Japanese for female ninja.
Female ninja. Okay. And the other person?
No nickname.
No nickname?
I have found no nickname for her.
There's no nickname. So it can go one of two ways. Either she has no strength, no power because she has no nickname. No strategy. You're just nothing. You're just floating through the air. Or it's the opposite of that. Go with the same concept that she's air, she's ether, she's everywhere. She's got no nickname. She could be anybody or anything. Mm-hmm. I've convinced myself it's going to be her.
All right. Well, taking a look at probability for probability's sake, this is the third fight in the UFC for Romero Borella. She is 1-2 inside the octagon. Her this is her fifth fight inside the octagon. She's 2-2. Her debut came at UFC 216, where she choked out Kalindra Farah. But in her biggest fight to date against her biggest opponent, Caitlin Chookagian, who we spoke about earlier, she took a unanimous decision loss. Bounced right back at UFC on ESPN +2 back in February, just around this time last year, against Talia Santos with a split decision victory, but fell to Lauren Murphy back in August at UFC on ESPN 5 by a TKO in the third round. Walking into the fight, Romero Borella is going to be going up against an opponent in De La Rosa, going up against an opponent like De La Rosa, who just took a loss to Andrea Lee back at UFC on ESPN +12 back in June. This is her first fight since June, so that's a little bit of a problem. But before that, got wins over Nadia Kasim, Rachel Ostovich, and Christina Marks on The Ultimate Fighter in an exhibition bout at against Nico Montano. Was one of her last losses before that 3-fight winning streak. So she's faced higher level competition before. Big opportunity for either of these fighters. I'm going to go with the person who's had the toughest competition inside the octagon, and that's Montana De La Rosa, who's come out the other side against someone like Ostovich, who is a proven competitor. Borella went up against someone like Chookagian, went the distance, but lost unanimously. And her most recent win in the UFC came by way of a split decision, and that was around this time last year. I'm going to be going with Montana De La Rosa.
No nickname.
No nickname.
All right, then. She'll be everywhere.
All right.
We're all going to need to stop at Rio Relaxo.
Yes. And, Steph, I want to thank you so much for being a part of the podcast this week.
Of course.
How can people follow you on social media?
Well, I think it's just easier if you look for my nickname, God's Unwanted Daughter, on Twitter or Instagram, and you'll find my face and pictures of dogs.
Yes, that's primarily exactly what you post on social media.
And desserts.
Yes. That has been the 2-point deduction this week. I want to thank Stephanie Sotilli. I want to thank all of you listening and watching this on YouTube. Well, listening, because I told you about the cameraman K2 in the Tokyo Olympics. But hopefully next week, the cameraman will be back. Hopefully he'll have all his fingers and his toes. And we may get a yak out of the deal, which isn't bad. If you would like to write letters, you could tweet. You can hate tweet me at MMA Mania. You can hate Instagram me at MMAmania.com. And you can leave your hateful comments and your suggestions on our YouTube channel. Be sure to like, subscribe, and ding the bell. Smash that like button. Ding that bell. Give me the monetization because I have to feed my dog. And be sure to subscribe to MMA Mania on YouTube. And also, if you're listening to the podcast for the first time, whether it's Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Ted's Podcast Emporium, wherever you get your audio needs, be sure to subscribe. And if you're listening to us, please leave a review. A 5-star review will do us a lot of good as we build this podcast. This has been our second episode, and I think it's probably our best one. Sadly, we didn't have an interview this week. I'd like to thank Matt Damon for coming by. He was just knocking on doors, talking about water, and I was going to talk to him, but then I mentioned Tom Brady going to the Las Vegas Raiders, and he tried to swing on me. It was awkward. We had a moment, and we lost it. But until next week, I'm Matt Ryan. This has been the 2-point deduction. So long from a random state.